The Daily Show desk had survived 30 years of political chaos, presidential administrations, cultural crises, and moments so absurd that only comedy could process them adequately. Tonight felt different. Meghan Markle sat across from Jon Stewart, and something about the studio energy suggested she'd prepared for the wrong interview. What she hadn't prepared for was someone who'd spent 30 years learning exactly how comedy could access truth faster than any other format. Jon opened warmly, called her appearance genuinely brave, said coming on a Monday night specifically, his night, the one that mattered, took something. He made it sound like a compliment. Meghan, cautiously composed, settled into the guest chair with practiced warmth. Then Jon asked about the UK trip she didn't fully make. What Meghan said made Jon's expression shift from warmth to something that had been waiting patiently for exactly this moment. What Jon said after that, still funny, still completely Jon Stewart, but building towards something that would be replayed on every entertainment platform by morning, would become the segment everyone discussed for days. Because 30 years had taught Jon Stewart one specific lesson. The funniest questions are always the most accurate ones. And tonight, Meghan Markle was about to discover exactly what that meant. This is the interview that broke the internet. Subscribe now, hit that notification bell, and let's see what happened. Meghan arrived with her usual entourage, settling into the guest chair with practiced warmth. Meghan Markle, Monday night, welcome. I want to say genuinely, this is brave. Coming on specifically this show, specifically this week, after the past month. That takes something. Meghan's smile was measured. I believe in genuine dialogue with different audiences. Different audiences, yes. Let's see how genuine the dialogue gets. I'm hopeful. I want to start with something that genuinely puzzles me, Jon said, leaning back with deceptive casualness. The UK trip, July. Harry goes, the children go. There's a Highgrove reunion with the king. Genuinely significant, genuinely positive. You went too, apparently, though the initial reporting suggested you might not. Help me reconstruct the timeline because it got confusing. Meghan's expression was controlled. We traveled as a family, which was always the intention. Always the intention, yet sources close to you described it as quite stressful, and one description from a sympathetic biographer used the word nightmare. Both your team and the palace gave conflicting accounts of the accommodation situation. What was the actual sequence of events? Security logistics required adjustment throughout. Adjustment. That's a good word. I use it when I'm avoiding specificity. What specifically adjusted? Because from outside it looks like something went sideways, and then everyone managed the story differently afterward. Every complex international trip involves real-time decisions. Real-time decisions that became public disputes between your office and Buckingham Palace. Those disputes don't usually happen when real-time decisions go smoothly. The children, Jon continued, his tone shifting slightly but the curiosity remaining constant. They went to Highgrove. They met their grandfather, the king, apparently for the first time properly in years. That's genuinely wonderful news. But the meeting was completely secret. No advance notice, no photographs, no confirmation until afterward. Why? We protect our children's private moments. You've done Netflix documentaries about private moments. You've described moments in documentaries that most parents would consider extremely private. What made this specific meeting require a level of secrecy you haven't applied to previous family content? The children's emotional well-being required discretion. Meeting your grandfather is emotionally complex enough to require operational secrecy? That's an interesting framing for what most families would describe as a nice visit. Meghan grabbed her water. Every family manages significant transitions differently. Transitions from 4 years of absence to a private meeting? Yes. But why secret? Unless something about the meeting itself required management beyond typical privacy protection. Let me ask something I've been genuinely curious about, Jon said. Your husband has made several visits to the UK over the past few years. Some solo, some with the children, now this one with everyone. The security situation that previously prevented family visits seems to have resolved, partly. What actually changed? Because the security concerns that prevented visits for 4 years apparently became manageable the moment the Invictus Games countdown required presence. Appropriate arrangements were made. Appropriate arrangements that took 4 years to develop, and coincided with a significant professional engagement. I'm not saying those things are connected. I'm asking whether they're connected. Harry's commitment to Invictus creates different operational contexts. Operational contexts. You know what I love about this conversation? The language. Operational contexts. Real-time decisions. Every time you're approaching something specific, there's a phrase that sounds substantive, but contains no actual information. I've studied politicians for 30 years. This is excellent political language. The as-ever produce guide, Jon said, pivoting with what appeared to be genuine amusement. July 14th. Beautiful seasonal content. Cherries, strawberries, tomatoes, basil, mint. Also, the exact week the CDC was dealing with a significant outbreak of cyclosporiasis, which is a parasitic intestinal illness linked to summer produce. The internet noticed the timing. Meghan's expression tightened visibly. I don't monitor every CDC health bulletin before posting seasonal content. Nobody expects real-time CDC coordination for lifestyle content, but your brand is built on intentionality, seasonal awareness, living thoughtfully. The gap between the brand premise and a produce guide during a produce-linked parasite outbreak is something I couldn't not notice. That connection is completely unfair. It's documented. The CDC bulletin is public. The post is public. The dates are public. I'm not connecting things that weren't connected. They were already connected by the calendar. The context was entirely different. The context is literally the same week on the same calendar. I've been doing this long enough to know that calendar-based irony doesn't require interpretation. It just requires reading. The Daytime Emmy nomination, Jon continued, with love Meghan got nominated for Outstanding Lifestyle Program. Congratulations, genuinely. But reports also describe Netflix sources saying the relationship is essentially finished. Those two things exist simultaneously. How? Recognition from the Television Academy is meaningful regardless of business dynamics. It's meaningful and also somewhat confusing. The show that's apparently ending its Netflix relationship gets an Emmy nomination. Is there a category for generated significant industry conversation despite commercial trajectory? Creative success and commercial performance are different metrics. Sure, but most people running a lifestyle brand would describe them as related metrics. Creative success that doesn't produce commercial success is usually called something other than success. You're reducing complex creative work to purely commercial terms. I'm asking how success and failure exist simultaneously for the same project. That's not reductive, that's a genuine question about how you're defining both words. Let's talk about what I'll call the staff situation, Jon said, his tone growing more direct. Reports of significant turnover at Archewell, multiple departures, specific descriptions of difficult working conditions. This has been reported consistently across different sources over several years. What's your explanation for the pattern? Every organization experiences natural staffing transitions. 18 people isn't natural transition. That's a number. Organizations that describe their working environment as excellent don't generate this specific volume of consistent, similar reporting from independent sources. What's actually happening internally? You're presenting incomplete reporting as established fact. I'm presenting consistent reporting from multiple independent sources over multiple years as a documented pattern. Those are different things, and I think you know they're different things. Media narratives develop momentum regardless of accuracy. Media narratives that are specifically inaccurate get corrected, legally or otherwise. You've demonstrated willingness to pursue legal remedies when you believe reporting is inaccurate. The staff reporting has generated no legal challenges. What does that suggest? I want to ask about Harry specifically, Jon said, shifting terrain. Sources sympathetic to you described the July trip as quite stressful. The palace accommodation situation became public in a way that seemed to catch everyone off guard. You've described wanting family reconciliation. From your perspective, what actually went wrong during this trip? Complex family situations involve unexpected elements. Every family trip involves unexpected elements. Sources described yours specifically as stressful in a way that suggested something beyond unexpected logistics. What was the stress specifically? I won't characterize private family dynamics publicly. You've characterized private family dynamics publicly in extensive detail in other formats. The characterization exists at length and in print. What makes July 2026 specifically off-limits? We're in an ongoing process of family healing. Ongoing process. That's beautiful language. But it's been ongoing for years, and July went specifically sideways in ways your own sympathizers acknowledged. What does an ongoing process look like when a specific moment goes sideways? The divorce rumors, Jon said, his tone carrying that particular Daily Show directness. They've been persistent for months. Specific. They've required formal denials. Your husband's recent trips to the UK have generated increasing discussion about whether your priorities align. What's actually happening in your marriage? Tabloid speculation without foundation. Speculation that generated formal response from your team, which is the part I keep coming back to. People in institutions with nothing to respond to typically don't respond. The response itself is information. What required the statement? False narratives spread without correction. False narratives spread when there's material to attach to. Your husband traveled to the UK for extended periods. You weren't always prominently present. The children went to meet their grandfather without you initially being confirmed as present. What's the material those narratives are attaching to? People who wish us harm generate false material. From nothing? Sustained, specific, months-long false material? That's either an extraordinary manufacturing operation, or there's something real underneath. Which is it? Let me try something different, Jon said, leaning forward with genuine curiosity. 30 years of this show. I've asked this question of presidents, senators, executives, celebrities. What do you actually want? Not for Archewell, not for your brand, not for your advocacy work. What does Meghan Markle, the person, want her life to look like 5 years from now? Silence. Meghan looked momentarily genuinely caught. The practiced composure flickered. My personal aspirations are... If the next word is private, I want to point out that you've shared personal aspirations in documentaries, books, and interviews at considerable length. What's different about this question? I focus on forward momentum rather than projection. Forward momentum toward what? That's the question. I can describe your complaints about where you've been in considerable detail. You've provided that material generously. I can't describe where you're trying to go, because that's the one thing you've never actually articulated. More silence. See, that's actually more revealing than anything else you've said tonight. Here's what I've been building toward, Jon said, his tone carrying genuine seriousness now underneath the habitual wit. I've watched your public story for years, and what I notice is that it has remarkable descriptive detail about everything that was wrong. The institution, the family, the media, the racism, the neglect, all of it detailed extensively. What it doesn't have is a clear vision of what you're building toward. We're building systemic change through... Systemic change is a process description, not a destination. Where does the road go? What does the destination look like? When Archewell succeeds, what exists that didn't exist before? When the advocacy works, what's different? I've asked this of politicians who couldn't answer it, and it's always the most revealing inability. Change takes time to articulate. Change you've been pursuing for years in a very public way. If you can't articulate the destination after this much time in public, either the destination doesn't exist yet, or something else is happening. You've used this show as a platform to reach different audiences, Meghan said, her composure cracking into something more confrontational. What you're doing is using me as content for political comedy. Jon's expression remained genuinely warm but entirely unmoved. I'm using documented events and your own public statements as material for questions you're not answering. That's not using you as content. That's doing journalism with a joke attached. The jokes are there because this is a comedy show. The questions are there because the questions exist independently of whether I ask them. Your framing is designed to humiliate. My framing is designed to be accurate and entertaining simultaneously. If the accuracy feels humiliating, that's worth examining, but it's not about my framing. You're doing exactly what every other host does, treating my life as entertainment. Your life generates entertainment because you've made it extensively public in entertainment formats. You've done this deliberately and profitably. The entertainment industry responding to entertainment content isn't a betrayal. It's the logical consequence of the choices you made. This interview has become hostile, Meghan said, standing up slightly. This interview has become specific, Jon said, entirely calm. You're conflating the two. Hostile would be personal attacks or fabrication. Specific means asking about documented events you're not explaining satisfactorily. The UK trip. The produce guide. The Emmy nomination paired with the Netflix situation. The staff departures. The marriage speculation. The inability to describe what you're building toward. Those are specific questions, not hostile ones. I came here expecting genuine dialogue. You've had genuine dialogue. Genuine dialogue includes questions you can't answer with talking points. That's what makes it genuine rather than managed. You're not interested in understanding. You're interested in catching me. I'm interested in understanding, which is why I keep asking the same questions in different ways, hoping the answer changes. It hasn't yet. That's not me not being interested. That's you not providing the understanding I'm looking for. Meghan grabbed her purse with the deliberateness of someone who'd made a decision. This show exploits people. This show asks people questions they'd rather not answer. Those are very different activities. Exploitation involves taking something from someone. Questions involve inviting someone to provide something. You've provided very little tonight. That's not exploitation. That's an unsuccessful invitation. History will judge what happened here. History will have good documentation of this specific period of your public life. The produce guide timing. The Emmy nomination for the show that's apparently ending. The UK trip that your sympathizers described as stressful. The ongoing marriage speculation. The staff pattern. The inability to describe a destination for all this effort. History will have all of that. He paused. History will also have this conversation, which was an opportunity to address those things directly and clearly. That opportunity is leaving with you. Meghan moved toward the exit. I genuinely hoped tonight would go differently, Jon said, his tone carrying something honest underneath the wit. Not because I expected you to be comfortable. Discomfort is fine. I've made senators uncomfortable. I've made presidents uncomfortable. Discomfort is sometimes what accuracy produces. I hoped you'd stay in the discomfort long enough to say something real. Meghan paused at the studio door. You're not interested in something real. You're interested in something usable. Real things are usable. That's actually not the conflict you think it is. The most usable moments on this show have always been the most honest ones. The things that go viral from this desk are the things that are both true and clear. I was offering you the chance to be both. Meghan left. The studio door closed. The audience sat in the particular silence that follows something they hadn't expected. Jon turned to face them. Okay, let me be clear about a few things, he straightened. Everything I asked tonight was based on documented events or her own public statements. The UK trip timeline is documented. The palace accommodation situation is documented. The produce guide timing is documented. The Emmy nomination paired with the Netflix situation is documented. The staff patterns are documented. The marriage speculation, which has generated formal denial responses, is documented. He paused. What I couldn't get documented was anything about where she's going. Every question about destination produced a description of process. Every question about what success looks like produced language about systemic change. Every question about what she personally wants produced strategic deflection. Here's what 30 years teaches you, Jon continued. When someone can describe their suffering in extraordinary, specific, emotional detail, and they can, at length, in multiple formats, but cannot describe what the positive version of their life looks like, that's a specific kind of stuck. The grievance has become load-bearing. Remove it and there's nothing structural left underneath. He looked at the camera. I don't say that to be cruel. I say it because I've watched politicians, executives, celebrities get stuck in exactly this way. The story of what wronged you becomes so central to your identity that the story of what you want becomes impossible to tell. Because wanting something positive requires risk, you might not get it, which creates new disappointment. Grievance is safer. It already happened. It can't be taken away. He managed a small, genuine smile. I was asking her to take a risk tonight, to say something real about what she's building toward. She wasn't ready for that. Maybe someday she will be. The footage aired that Monday. Comedy Central made no edits. The clips that spread captured the collision. Every time you're approaching something specific, there's a phrase that sounds substantive but contains no actual information. The calendar-based irony doesn't require interpretation. It just requires reading. The response itself is information. What required the statement? Forward momentum toward what? That's the question. The grievance has become load-bearing. Remove it and there's nothing structural left underneath. The most usable moments on this show have always been the most honest ones. Meghan's team released a statement calling the interview a politically motivated ambush disguised as satire. Jon addressed it during his following week's episode. Politically motivated. I've spent 30 years asking politicians questions they couldn't answer without party affiliation mattering much. I asked a lifestyle brand founder about her produce guide timing, her Emmy nomination, her UK trip logistics, and what she's building toward. If that's political, it's a very specific kind of politics I haven't encountered before, he added. The statement also called it an ambush. I announced every topic before asking about it. Ambushes don't typically include advance notice. The word they're looking for might be specific. We were specific. Specific felt like ambush because they'd prepared for something else entirely. 30 years of finding truth through humor. A produce guide during a parasite outbreak. An Emmy nomination for a show that's ending. A UK trip described by sympathizers as stressful. And she couldn't describe what she's building toward. What does that tell you about what happens when grievance becomes the only story you know how to tell? If you want more content that recognizes when the most revealing moment is what someone can't say, subscribe. Turn on notifications. Drop a like. Share this with someone. They need to see what happens when genuine curiosity meets a story with no destination. More truth. More humor. More of what 30 years teaches you about the space between what people say and what they mean. Stay with us.